Shalom from Israel to all of the Daystar viewers around the world. I'm Moshe Bar Tzvi, the producer and founder of Israel Now News. We at Israel Now News are dedicated to bringing you the full story and the truth about Israel from Israel. It's written in the Holy Bible when David said in Psalm 25:5, "Lead me in your truth and teach me, for you are the God of my salvation. For you I wait all the day long." And God says in Zechariah 8:16, "These are the things that you shall do. Speak out the truth to one another. Judge with truth and judgment to peace in your gates. And always search for the truth, and the truth shall set you free." John 8:31. I hope you enjoyed the program. God bless you from Jerusalem. Shalom, shalom.
Welcome to Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner.
In our top story, the Palestinian Authority has made a unilateral bid for non-member status in the United Nations. After having their application for full member status blocked in the UN, the Palestinian Authority has chosen to move forward with their bid to become a non-member observer state in the General Assembly. Both Israel and the United States opposed the unilateral bid, calling it a move to sidestep direct negotiations. The Palestinians believe that the upgrade in status will strengthen their claim to Judea, Samaria, and Jerusalem, as well as allow them to prosecute Israel for trumped-up war crimes in an international forum. Israeli officials have reiterated the need to return to direct negotiations, but the Palestinians have insisted on snubbing Israel and appealing to the international community, which is becoming more sympathetic to their cause. Erin Viner has more on that story.
Yes, Yochanan, at least 132 of the United Nations member states have already recognized Palestine as a state, which amounts to more than two-thirds of the world body. Despite the fact that the United States has vehemently opposed the statehood bid, it does seem as though the majority of Europe is supporting it. If the bid passes, the Palestine Liberation Organization, which was once categorized as a terrorist organization by the U.S. State Department, will be recognized in the United Nations as the official representative of the Palestinian people.
Ehud Barak has resigned. After 53 years of service to the State of Israel, the current defense minister announced that he will not run in the upcoming Knesset elections. Many have criticized Barak for inserting his liberal politics into his work as defense minister, most namely his criticism of the Israeli communities in Judea and Samaria. Ehud Barak has served as defense minister for 5 years and said that his decision stems from his desire to dedicate more time to his family.
Israel's ruling Likud political party held its primary elections last week. The center-right Conservative Party will continue to be led by current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israeli public will head to the polls to elect the 19th Knesset on January 22nd.
Mohammed Morsi of the fanatic Muslim Brotherhood has made a play for absolute power in Egypt. In a move that has Egyptians calling him the new Pharaoh, Morsi has granted himself supreme authority. This sweeping power includes exempting all of his decrees from legal challenge and the dismissal of all of the cabinet which served former Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak. Violent protests were staged throughout Egypt in response to Morsi's decree. The opposition claims that Morsi has undermined the Egyptian judiciary, placing himself above the law.
A team of international forensic experts were in Ramallah last week to gather samples of the remains of former Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat. The terrorist leader, who spearheaded the first and second intifadas, died in Paris in 2004 at the age of 75. According to French hospital records, Arafat died of a stroke following an unspecified blood disease. Despite Israel's call that full disclosure of Arafat's medical records be made, none have been forthcoming. Since that time, a number of causes of death have been speculated upon, including AIDS or poisoning by Israel, a charge adamantly denied by Israel. After exhumation on Tuesday, Yasser Arafat's body was reburied the same day with full military honors.
Despite the international media's claim that the ceasefire with Gaza terrorists has held, Israel is still working overtime to protect its citizens. Last week, an Arab man from Gaza armed with a knife infiltrated the town of Sde Avraham with the intent of murdering Israelis. The assailant broke into a home and stabbed a woman several times. The head of the emergency team said, "We're lucky this wasn't a second Itamar," referring to the brutal slaughter last year of a young family in the Jewish community of Itamar. The IDF attempted to arrest the terrorist, but they were forced to open fire, killing him. This comes just days after a mob of 300 Palestinians attempted to rush the Gaza border and attack IDF soldiers deployed there. The soldiers shouted warnings, then fired shots at the men's legs. One Palestinian was killed and 10 were injured. IDF spokeswoman Lieutenant Colonel Avital Leibovich said that trying to breach the Gaza fence in order to enter Israel is a violation of the ceasefire.
A 37-year-old Arab man has been arrested by Israeli intelligence services on charges of spying for the Hezbollah terror organization. There's been a growing trend among Arab espionage agencies to use Israeli Arabs and Arab residents of Israel for reconnaissance rather than Palestinians because they are free to move about the country and are afforded the same rights and privileges as all Israeli citizens. Concern is rising over the impact the emerging pattern could have on the delicate balance that Israel maintains in guaranteeing the security of Jewish residents while protecting the rights of Arab citizens who are increasingly disloyal to the state.
In a related story, a 27-year-old Arab man from East Jerusalem was charged with planting 2 fake explosives on the Jerusalem light rail during Operation Pillar of Defense. And 2 Arab miners were arrested last week for throwing a firebomb at the Jerusalem light rail. No injuries were reported, but the train sustained some damage.
Iranian President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad has congratulated the leader of the terrorist organization Hamas for its attacks against Israel during Operation Pillar of Defense. The leader of the hardline Islamic Republic personally telephoned Hamas Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh to say that Iran stands with the Palestinians against Israel and that the Palestinian resistance was victorious against the Jewish state. Gaza-based terrorists fired more than 13,000 missiles into Israel over the past 12 years, including more than 1,500 rockets during the recent 8-day operation. Britain's Sunday Times reported that Tehran is now rushing to restock Hamas missile arsenal and cited satellite images showing Iran loading a cargo ship bound for Gaza with Fajar 5 medium-range rockets. According to an Israeli official quoted in the Times report, Tehran is acting to rearm Hamas and other Gaza-based terror groups quickly because they are a necessary part of Iran's retaliation of a possible Israeli strike against its own nuclear development program.
A group of Israeli Americans have filed a lawsuit against U.S. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and the U.S. State Department for allowing American funds to be used to support terrorist groups. The lawsuit alleges that when the U.S. State Department allocated funds to the Palestinian Authority, it ignored transparency requirements and congressional safeguards, allowing the money to be passed from the PA to known terrorist organizations such as Hamas. In April of this year, U.S. President Barack Obama signed a waiver releasing $192 million in aid to the Palestinians, which had been frozen by Congress. The lawsuit further states that the White House did not comply with regulations concerning presidential waivers, which granted emergency funding to the Palestinians. The plaintiff's attorney said U.S. funding of the PA and UNRWA is difficult to trace, and the State Department has been lax in requiring the Palestinians to utilize bank accounts and other transfer methods that ensure transparency. She went on to say that elements of the U.S. government, particularly the State Department and U.S. aid, are breaking the law and must cease all funding of the PA immediately. And she added that U.S. aid to the Palestinians is being used to kill innocent people.
The operational cost of the Iron Dome missile defense system, which worked to intercept rockets fired into Israel by Palestinian terrorists during Operation Pillar of Defense, is estimated at about $30 million. In the 8 days of heavy fighting, the Iron Dome shot down more than 80% of the rockets fired at the civilian population of Israel. According to estimates by officials in the Jewish state, a total of 13 Iron Dome batteries are necessary to provide sufficient security throughout the country.
In the backdrop of the success of the Iron Dome anti-missile system, Israeli and American engineers have joined forces to create a new missile defense system. Referred to in Hebrew as David's Sling, also known as the Magic Wand, it is designed to intercept short to medium-range missiles. This new system will provide anti-missile capabilities for short-range ballistic missiles, large-caliber rockets, and cruise missiles. Israel's defense industry said the United States Missile Defense Agency successfully tested the system in Israel last week. Israeli officials said that they expect David Sling will be operational in the year 2014. They have already begun to develop a more sophisticated system in conjunction with Boeing.
And that concludes the news portion of our show. Stay tuned for Ask the Source with Josh Reinstein.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come sail the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus calmed a raging storm. Experience Jerusalem, where Jesus restored a paralyzed man. Explore Capernaum, where Jesus spoke a centurion servant into health. To learn more about standing where it all happened in Israel, visit goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
You'll never be the same.
Hello and welcome to Ask the Source. I'm your host Josh Reinstein, and we're here at the stunning Daystar Studios overlooking the Temple Mount. My guest today is Sandra Rejwan, who is the director of the Brazil-Israel Chamber of Commerce. Sandra, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm very glad to be here today.
Sandra, tell our viewers a little bit about what is the Israel-Brazil Chambers of Commerce?
The Chamber of Commerce is an organization that promotes the cooperation between Brazil and Israel in the field of technology, and science, and commerce, of course, industry.
We're seeing a alliance between the government of Brazil and some of the radical Islamic regimes like Iran. Why do you think the Brazilian government is open to these relationships?
Brazil is a country that's looking for big markets, and the Arab countries, they are much bigger markets than we are here in Israel. So it comes like it's a confusion actually, but I see that it's changing because they see they work for Iran, and they work for other countries that they see actually that it's not right to do so.
Now, we're seeing in Brazil a real revival of Bible-believing Christians.
Yes.
They say that there are 35% Bible-believing Christians today, but by 2020 it will be 50% Bible-believing Christians. How will that change how Brazil supports Israel?
I think that it will change them dramatically because they are seeing not only that Israel is a Bible country and for his history, but for the justice as well. As much as you see Israel without the filters of the media and other filters, so you became more involved with the truth. So,
why do you think it's important to build economic cooperation between Israel and Brazil?
Everything that opens up the markets and opens up even the diplomacy, the public diplomacy, we have to have as much friends as we can have in order to see the truth, what is going on here objectively. That's what I think.
Now, Sandra, you're also a candidate for Likud, running for a member of parliament in this upcoming elections. Why did the government decide to go to elections?
We have because of the government here, it's the system here, it's different. So we are always pressed. We don't have a majority, although the Likud party is the party that is ruling the government, but we are not the majority. So that's why we couldn't have the budget approved. So that's why we have to go to elections again.
Now, you're running for Likud, which is today the leading party, and according to the polls, Prime Minister Netanyahu will win handedly. Why do you think it's important for you to be a member of Knesset and the Likud party?
I see that the public diplomacy in Israel is very weak. So we always put out fires, as I was talking before. We are always putting out fires. So we have to have a public diplomacy that explains everything that we are doing as a sovereign country and not apologize all the time. And the Likud party can deal and can get to the peace the way it should be. Yes.
One of the campaign strategies of the Likud is to focus the election on the threat of Iran, which is a real and scary threat. You having ties to Brazil, How does that help you inform the voter public here about the real threat of Iran and the threat that Iran is cooperating with countries around the world?
That's right. That's what I say. That it's always Latin America is like a laboratory for terror because it's very easy to get there. And the problem is, the danger is that Latin America is seen by the Israeli government and by Israelis like a paradise, and everything is samba and carnival and everything is okay there. And actually, we are not there in our public diplomacy and the importance of explaining everything that goes on here. But Ahmadinejad and Hamas and Hezbollah, they do. So it's very, very dangerous for us as Israel to be there, to not to be there. And I want to be a part of the government exactly because of that. Because we have to explain there, we have to show all the dangers of what is going on and all the risks of you're not seeing the problem, so you won't see the importance. So that's why it's very important to be there.
Sandra, there are literally tens of millions of people watching this show. What message do you have for our viewing audience?
I say, come to Israel. Come and see the Israel and the people of Israel without the filters of the media. You'll see a beautiful country that we have here. You'll see the politics. You'll see everything as it is. Come to Israel.
Thank you, Sandra, for being on the show.
My pleasure.
And thank you for tuning in to Ask the Source. I'm your host, Josh Reinstein. Now back to the studio.
More than 1 million Jewish children have been killed by abortion in Israel since 1948. Israel is currently engaged in a demographic war for its very survival as a Jewish state. Imagine what a difference 1 million more Jews would have made for Israel. Friends of Efrat saves the lives of thousands of children every year by providing support to pregnant women in distress. Since 1977, Efrat has saved over 30,000 lives and is recognized as a world leader in preventing abortions. You can play a major role in Israel's survival now by helping us save Israel's unborn children.
Up next, Shining Light from Israel.
This was maybe, I don't know, 70 years ago. I remember this.
I would say it was a very happy childhood.
No radio, no television.
פעם אחת אמרו לי, אתה יודע איך נולדים ילדים? אמרתי לא, אז הם הסבירו לי. אז אמרתי להם, ההורים שלי לא. לא יכול להיות.
It amazes me how little I know about my grandfather.
My father, used to be like a Hossid, happy and like a glass of vodka.
You know, life is strange. Life is strange.
I never imagined my grandfather as a child.
My father was a good swimmer, and he put out his hands and I should lay on them. And then he told me the movements, and he pulled away his
And you went down?
I swam, and I swam.
That was the life before the war. He used to go for it.
I don't know what would have happened to me if I'd grown up in Poland. I think I'd go back, though. There must be someone or some place that you liked when you were a kid.
I was looking for the place we were living. I couldn't find it, except for one thing. That in our court we have had a well of water. So I was looking for the well and finally discovered the well. Well, the only thing that wasn't burned was the water. So I sent down a bucket.
My grandfather told me the older he gets, the more he thinks about what it was like to be a kid.
And I drank the water. The people who went with me, they warned me not to drink, but I clearly drank. And that was the only taste of my childhood that remained alive.
Which is funny, because all I want to do is get older.
I'm grateful to be alive, that's it.
Please stay tuned for the ICEJ report from the International Christian Embassy, Jerusalem.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come explore Jerusalem, where Jesus opened blind eyes. Visit the hills of Galilee, where Jesus fed the multitude. Stroll through Capernaum, where Jesus lived and taught and healed. To learn more about standing where it all happened in Israel, visit www.goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
You'll never be the same.
The recent conflict in Gaza presented again a severe challenge to the Israeli population, to its government, but also to the entire security situation. The people which were most affected by that recent conflict was the civilian population of southern Israel. In particular, the elderly people and the children were affected by these horrendous attacks of terrorism on the nation of Israel.
The ICEJ has long established relationships in the areas surrounding Gaza, and over the past few weeks we have received numerous requests for help. During the first few days of the recent conflict, an ICEJ-sponsored relief team of 9 volunteers was on the ground providing food, first aid kits, blankets, toiletries, and other necessities to those affected by the hostilities.
Our morning starts with a siren that wakes us up, having to get ready and shower quickly, just doing everything quickly. Then we leave for work in fear, hoping that we don't get hit on the way, that we don't have to lie down on the ground prostrate like you just did. The workday is short, we go quickly and come back quickly, and we can't leave our homes. The supermarket is a 5-minute process, going in to grab the most basic necessities to exist day by day. We can't just go and visit places or go to the malls, even just to breathe the outside air. We are stuck here.
ICEJ aid directors also visited the city of Ashdod and assisted with the distribution of items for the many children whose daily lives have been disrupted due to the constant sirens warning of potential rocket attacks.
My children are frightened. They are not really living. This is not a way of life, to run from siren to siren. We live in the shadow of fear. We have gone through many wars. We have learned through many wars. Praise God, as they say. We are pushing forward and we are surviving. We are a nation that survives, and we will continue to survive. Thank you guys for caring about us. You know how much it supports and encourages us that someone from the outside comes and cares for us. First of all, it warms the heart to see that people are thinking about us, coming to us and worrying about us. That they care about us and identify with us, with our pain and the circumstances that we are facing. Not just what we see in the television, the people are with you, but that the people come down to us and hug us, even if it's not with material things. Simply a hug on its own fills our hearts and gives us the strength to continue, and to hold up our troops until we arrive at the point of quiet, which we are waiting for in this country.
As you have seen, the International Christian Embassy is fully committed to stand with Israel in its times of crisis. The Christian Embassy is being located here in the city of Jerusalem, in the heart of Israel, and we are committed to stay here and to stand with Israel even in its most difficult times. We set up a special emergency fund which is available to help Israel in times of need, and through that we could help over this past few weeks in a particular way to stand with the nation of Israel in this difficult season of their history. And we want to invite you today to support our ministry, to stand with us as we show Israel that they are not alone. We are your embassy here in Jerusalem, and we invite you to partner with us and to make a measurable difference here in the land of Israel. May the Lord bless you out of Zion.
What makes the miracles of Jesus even more miraculous? Standing where they happened, in Israel. Come sail the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus calmed a raging storm. Experience Jerusalem, where Jesus restored a paralyzed man. Explore Capernaum, where Jesus spoke a centurion servant into health. To learn more about standing where it all happened, in Israel, visit goisrael.com. Come visit Israel.
You'll never be the same.
That's all for this edition of Israel Now News. I'm Yochanan El-Rom.
And I'm Erin Viner, reporting from our studio in Jerusalem. Please join us again next week for all your Israel updates.